Hello, everyone, and welcome. This week, we're going to talk about the best DVC trip we've ever taken, coming up on this week's episode of The DVC Show. Hello, everyone, and welcome. Coming to you from the Bob Varley studio in Orlando, Florida. I'm your host, Pete Werner, joined in the studio this week by my good friends, Mr. Sean Falk.
Hi.
Our producer, Mr. Corey Fiescanaro.
Welcome home.
Via Skype, Mr. Paul Krieger.
Hey, everyone.
And Webmaster Doc on the boards, also known as Rob Lindsay to his wife. Or does she call you Webmaster Doc, too?
It depends on the day.
And also joining us from the world of DVC, DVC Resale Market, DVCRentalStore.com, Monera Financial, all those wonderful companies. We have Marissa Valaton.
Hi, thanks for having me.
And Derek DeBoer.
Hello. Happy Monday, everybody.
There we go. Now that the camera switched. I hate Skype. This will be the last week that we're using Skype. Do you hear me, Fiasco?
Oh, I hear you.
Because Craig is telling me the studio's all set for the other thing. So
we'll set it up.
Well, we'll set it up. All right. Well, welcome, folks. Hope your week is off to a good start. We thought it might be fun to have a kind of reminiscent discussion on our favorite DVC trips that we've ever taken. And I think I'm going to start with Marissa, since she's up on my screen right now. And why don't you start out, Marissa? Tell us about the best DVC trip you ever took.
Okay, wow. Put me on the spot.
I'm excited.
So we try to do something. My son was born on my husband and I's anniversary. So May 27th each year, we try to do like a big family thing to celebrate birthday, anniversary, kind of just a big family day. So last year in May, my aunt gave me a call and said, hey, I have a friend who has all these points. They can't do anything with them. They're going to expire in 2 days. Any chance you guys could do anything with these points? So they gave us a ton of points and we were like, all right, what's available? And the only thing that was available was the 3-bedroom Grand Villa at Grand Floridian. So we packed up our bags next day and headed out. I love the Grand Floridian. It's my absolute favorite resort. So we headed on over there. And if you've ever been in the Grand Villa, it's spectacular. But it was just super special because my son was at the age, it was his second birthday. So he was at the age where he's really starting to kind of appreciate the Disney elements. We got a big cake, champagne. We made steak dinner up there. So we just had a wonderful time. The resort is stunning. I remember sitting out watching the fireworks and just tearing up just because it's just one of those pure magical moments, something you wouldn't normally do, but absolutely incredible experience. And I mean, we had the 3-bedroom all to ourselves. So we would like go and watch a movie in one room, and the bathroom is just stunning. The steam shower, everything about that location, the room was just super, super magical. So it was just kind of one of those perfect Disney experiences where all the stars aligned, the pixie dust was out, and we just had a super great time.
You could have called me.
I did. I actually did. You guys were too busy.
Oh, yeah,
too busy.
Yeah, I agree with you on the Grand Villa at the Grand Floridian. That media room, it has its own media room, by the way. That media room is amazing, and it is. It's an absolutely gorgeous unit. What about you, Derek? What's your favorite trip that you've ever taken?
Yeah, well, obviously I wasn't going to the Grand Villa with her. So mine would have to be, and I thought long and hard about this because I really was. And I even asked my wife because we've been members for about 20 years. And it kind of dawned on me that I think the best one, and I know it may sound kind of cliche, but I think it was my first one. So it was back in 1999 when we decided to join Disney Vacation Club. And we took that first trip. So this was before we had kids. So we went down, stayed at the Boardwalk, and it was one of those trips where it was such a great feeling because all DVC members can know this feeling is that when the trip is done, we weren't for the first time, we weren't like super bummed out. So we didn't have that Disney depression that normally sets in if you're not a Disney Vacation Club member. So it was that feeling of this amazing trip was done, but we know that we're coming back. And in fact, we already had the next trip was already planned, right? We probably had like the next 5 or 6 trips already planned, but it was that feeling of you weren't bummed out and you weren't sad when that trip was over, because we realized and said, my God, this was the best thing that we ever did, is that we get to come back and we don't have to worry about how expensive the hotel rooms were going up. Because I remember specifically, I was staying at Port Orleans. Back then it was called Dixie Landings. And I remember staying at Dixie Landings and pricing out the trip the next time, and it was literally like $50 or $70 more than this one. And we're like, we got to look into this Disney Vacation Club thing. So that was the trip we bought it. That was the trip that we used it then that following year. And then since then, 5 years later, we brought our son down at the time when he was a baby. And then we really realized it and said, my God, this was the best thing we ever did, because we have a door. So we have a 1 bedroom with like a separate space to put the crib, and everybody has their privacy, and you have a full kitchen and all that. So yeah, that really was probably the first one, was definitely the best. But then everyone after that just keeps getting better and better. And I tell people all the time, I'm like, listen, I live 20 minutes away from Disney. I love my ownership now more than I did 20 years ago when I first bought it. So
yeah, it's funny. Yeah. It's funny you mentioned that, because I just bought in myself officially like 2 years ago. Right. But when I lived in New Jersey, my ex, John, and I had bought in. He got it in the divorce. But, so like I started using it back then. But, now, I mean, I do this for a living, and I live, a half hour away from the parks. And everybody's like, well, why buy DVC when you live there? Well, first of all, because I love being at the resorts, and the DVC resorts are amazing. But also, I have a big family. And they like to come here. And I love them. I do. I love my family. I just don't want them staying with me. So it is wonderful to be able, my brother and his wife and his daughter are coming down next month. And I got them a nice room over at Saratoga, because that's what was available. Resort of last resort. But so I definitely hear you. I also just realizing I didn't plug our sponsors at the beginning of this show properly. So let me correct that right now. Our show is brought to you by the World of DVC. That includes DVCResaleMarket.com. If you want to buy a DVC resale contract, which I highly suggest. Derek works with DVC Resale Market. Derek also just sold me a contract. So that's the thing with doing these. That's the thing with doing these shows. That whatever advertising revenue we make from having a sponsor is immediately spent buying another DVC contract. And then, of course, DVCRentalStore.com if you want to rent out your points, or if you're looking to rent points. They're a wonderful partner. And, of course, MoneraFinancial.com. I've taken to referring to Monera as the crack of the DVC world, because it makes it so incredibly easy to finance a new contract. If you find that contract you want and you want to finance it, it just doesn't get any easier than Monera. It's frightening how easy it is. Don't have to do a credit check. Don't have to go through no hard credit pulls, no nothing like that. So MoneraFinancial.com is that one. So I just wanted to make sure I got that out there. I have used all 3 of these companies personally, so I can speak to them and vouch for them personally, especially Monera. Use Monera a few times. All right, so Fiasco, let's go over to you.
Yeah, so I bought DVC about almost 2 years ago, about a year and 6 months ago. No, it was about a year and 3 months ago. But I've done all my DVC stays as a local, so they've all been little staycations. And I know we're plugging Saratoga as the resort of last resort. And actually, I did do a review of Saratoga about 2 years ago, and it was a fairly negative review throughout our DVC resorts. We did a bunch of them. Saratoga, I think, was the most negative. However, my best DVC staycation was actually at Saratoga Springs. We did 3 days in a 1-bedroom. I got a really good deal on it, and that's why I picked it up, was because the 1-bedroom for that weekend was like a steal. It was like 18, 19 points a night. So we went with that, and it was like we had our own apartment outside of Disney Springs. We got Congress Park, and it was just. I always speak to the reason I love DVC as a local is living here. The magic and the way you experience Disney definitely does change. I've heard people say that it's the exact same. I don't understand where they're coming from really with that, because it's definitely different. It's still amazing, but it's different, and you experience your day-to-day there differently than you would on a vacation. But when I take these little staycations, it's like a vacation again, and I experience it like a vacation. So at Saratoga, walking to Disney Springs, just a nice leisurely stroll. All the shops and dining there is just amazing. Short walk back to your room at the end of the day. Now, the dining at Saratoga Springs isn't the most ideal, but what we actually did that weekend was utilize the buses at Disney Springs to go back and forth to things like the Contemporary, and we needed the Wave, and then we'd take the monorail over to the Polynesian, and then when we were done at the Polynesian getting our Dole Whip and stuff, then we took the bus from the Polynesian back to Disney Springs. And Saratoga is unique in that way that if you're staying at Congress Park, you have access to that bus system to go to all the Disney resorts and just get a different vibe for whatever day you're feeling. So every day we took the bus over to a different resort, and it was just awesome. It was a way that we've never vacationed at Disney before, but because we're locals, because we get to go whenever we want, and we have this DVC weekend stay, we're like, let's try something different that we've never done before, and it was awesome.
I've only had one trip as a member myself, which was a recent Alani trip that we're going to talk more in depth about on another show. So I won't inundate you with that. But prior to that, we did actually get to go to Riviera for the opening weekend, and that I would say is my first real experience staying somewhere. We had done early on in us filming things for Disney Vacation Club. We stayed. It did like a 7 and 7 kind of deal, but I didn't really. You're just working so much during it. It's hard to immerse yourself as much. But at Riviera, I really got to, and we had the 3-bedroom, and I got to see a lot of the different rooms. But we did have the 3-bedroom Grand Villa there. And it was so cool. And I remember the whole lead up to Riviera, everything was so contentious about it. It was just this new resort that's coming and the restrictions for buying there. And every time I drive past it, I thought it looked either unfinished or maybe like a prison or something. So I still think it's like hideous from the outside. But at night, it's beautiful. It's so pretty at night. And that really is where it shines. And I'd just been seeing this building that I thought was actually an extension of Caribbean Beach for the longest time. And just actually going and checking in and seeing it for the first time was so incredible to walk in and see what a good job they did. Still not a huge fan of the lobby there, but the way they worked all the coloring throughout, and I loved just going around the resort and getting to see the different paintings and the art that was there and seeing how they incorporated the Disney characters into it. I've always wanted them to include more IP into every aspect of the park. I don't think there's enough IP at Disney. So I really loved that, and just getting to see the room itself, just the great job they did. It was so modern, it was so nice, and just a very relaxing stay. And also the dining, getting to go to Topolino for breakfast and for dinner. Those opening days especially, like they were just really on it, like making sure that this was a good experience for everyone, and it was just incredible.
We were there for the grand opening of Riviera was special, and it is stunning. Rooms are gorgeous. The resort is gorgeous. My only problem, as Sean mentioned, my only problem with Riviera are those resale restrictions. I just feel like it takes value away. Not that I go into a DVC contract, thinking I'm going to sell it or, angling to sell it, but I want to know that I can, and that I'm not selling something that's really restricted.
Mm.
No, it is absolutely stunning. Absolutely stunning. And that Grand Villa was,
yeah. And
was
getting to see it like calmed those. It was like there was so much drama leading up to it, and like the gnawing and gnashing of teeth and all this kind of thing, and it just calmed everything down once it opened to a degree. So
yeah, not nearly as contentious now with Riviera as it was prior to its opening. I agree. Rob, let's go over to you. Rob Lindsay, Webmaster Doc. Talk since you've been staying at DVC. I think your first trip at DVC was with Jesus, wasn't it?
I think so. We've had so many trips over the last number of years.
Millennia.
I've calculated that we have stayed in DVC resorts for over 300 nights. Over 3 years of nights.
Wow.
Since 1993. And so they all kind of run into each other. We've never had a bad trip. Doesn't matter the resort, doesn't matter how long we stayed. We've had nothing but great trips because of DVC. But I think the most memorable one for us was our very first one. We purchased in June of 93, and our first trip was in October of 93. And we had a 1-bedroom, which was a huge mistake because we can't stay anyplace else now.
Yep.
We've had family or friends with us. We've gotten 2 bedrooms or grand villas, but I think we've only had a handful of studio stays over this period of time. But we got there, and the resort looked even better than the model did. As we went in, of course, the doormat says "Welcome Home," and you really felt like you were home. You walked in the door on at Old Key West just inside the entryway. There's a mirror and a little built-in shelf, a key shelf there, and there was a photo album waiting for us to take with us. It was just 3 by 4 inches, but it was a little photo album. Maybe it was 3 by 5, but photo album that said your Disney vacation memories. And we've still got that. It's up in the attic right now, but we still have that little memento. But the resort was beautiful, and we felt the same way each time we came back. It truly was going home again. Welcome home, everybody. That's a very well-used phrase now. Everybody says it. Even Corey Fiasconero says it occasionally.
Yep.
Yes, he does.
But that trip was something that we'll never forget.
Paul, what about you?
It's hard to make light of what we've dealt with this past year.
Amen.
But when I really sit down and think about it, and when Amy and I have talked over all of our Disney Vacation Club trips, it's hard to ignore how amazing our trip this past July was. For us, it was a much needed breath of fresh air, getting back to the parks, getting back to Walt Disney World, getting back to feeling a sense of normality with everything. We took the opportunity and we blogged about it over on DVC Fan. We did a 6-resort split stay. So we stayed at Copper Creek, we stayed at Grand Floridian, Animal Kingdom Lodge, Boardwalk, Old Key West, and got to try out Riviera for the first time. Every single resort that we stayed at, the welcome that we received from cast members was something that we will always remember. They wanted you to return, and they were happy that you were there. And I think that was something that we needed. And I also think it's something that they needed. They really wanted us to be back, and we were thrilled to be enjoying all of our Disney Vacation Club properties again. So when I could easily agree with Derek and sort of say our first trip ever, but it was wonderful that we felt safe enough to go and travel down there and be there right after the initial reopening, because I really think that made that trip extraordinary. And not forgetting the fact that it was very empty. I mean, those first couple of weeks, those first couple of months after the parks reopened, very little people were traveling. Very few people were in the parks, so there was short wait times. So the entire experience, from top to bottom, was amazing. And again, I don't want to lose sight of what we're dealing with and what we continue to deal with. But that opportunity just made that it made it feel like a true welcome home, welcome back to Disney Vacation Club.
Yeah, and I share that. I stayed at Bay Lake Tower when it first reopened back in June, and I was filled with gratitude on that trip. I was filled with gratitude. Grateful to live here. Grateful to be a DVC member, because those are the only resorts that were open at that point. And just, to kind of reconnect with it. But I also wanted to mention something that Rob had said, that they stayed in a one bedroom and never looked back. Whenever anybody that's thinking about buying into DVC asks my advice, invariably they say, oh, well, we're figuring, we'll get a studio for 1 week a year, so we're basing our points on that. No, absolutely not. Plan for a one bedroom, because invariably at some point, you are going to stay in a one bedroom. And you're going to be like, oh, okay, no, I'm not going back to a studio. I'm not going back to staying in a studio. I have to stay in a one bedroom now. I have to. I mean, not that the studios aren't great. And there are many people where the studios work. But I hear these stories so often that you buy in, planning out to stay in a studio. Like, you buy enough points that you're going to spend a week in a studio at this resort. They come back and I hear them say, yeah, well, we stayed in a one bedroom and really think we probably need more points. So plan on a one bedroom.
We've heard a lot since the reopening as well that Disney Vacation Club has been doing upgrades for a fair number of people. And those upgrades tend to be into a one bedroom or a two bedroom. And I have to almost wonder, to a certain degree, if they're starting to play into this as well. If they're starting to go, oh, let's give you a taste of the one bedroom, and then, well, you need more points. So I'm starting to see that trend.
When I thought about this, when I thought about my favorite DVC stay, there was only one that I could use. And it was in the fall of 90. I think it was the fall of 98 when I first moved down here. When John and I moved down here. And we had used our points to get a grand villa and 2 studios, and had my parents, my brother and his wife, my sister and her husband, and my niece and my nephew down. And it was the only time that we'd ever done a family trip like that. Like, when we were kids, we did stuff like, we would go places, but it was the first time. Unfortunately, my sister in Massachusetts, my late sister Susan, couldn't come, but did have my brother Charlie and his wife Cookie, and my sister Barbara and her husband Mike, and then my niece Melanie, my nephew Carl, and my mom, my dad, myself, and John. And we were there for a week at Old Key West and had the best time. I can't even describe how much we enjoyed that trip. And I was really ended up being very grateful for it, because less than 18 months later, my father passed. And it was the last opportunity, really, we had to do that. And if we didn't have DVC, that trip wouldn't have happened. Because at that point, none of us could have afforded all those accommodations. Just wouldn't have been possible. John and I couldn't have afforded it at that point. The business was brand new. My parents, my family, like, it would have been like, to do it like that. Maybe we could have stayed off site and, gotten cheap hotel rooms or something like that, but not Old Key West, not a Grand Villa, not those rooms. And especially in a family full of cooks, having that kitchen in the Grand Villa was ideal. But that experience for me never would have happened had it not been for DVC. My family, to this day, we're 20 plus years on, still talk about it. They still talk about it. We still talk about that trip and how wonderful that trip was. And this is coming from a group of jaded New Jersey people that talk about that trip and kind of like light up. And it meant so much more even after my father passed away. We realized we didn't know it at the time, but that was the last opportunity we had for that. And I always remind myself that if not for DVC and the way it's structured and the way it works, where you can bank and borrow and all that stuff, we never would have been able to do that at that point. We never would have been able to do that at that point. And even though I wasn't able to do it this past December, hopefully at some point, for my mother, my mother's turned 90, and I had booked a ton of DVC rooms for my family coming into town, to come into town and celebrate her birthday. Of course, the world changed those plans. But I don't know that I could even think about it for that many people if not for DVC. So when we talk about DVC's value, the conversation almost always is in how much per point are you paying and what are the dues? And those are legitimate things to discuss. But if you don't factor in the intangible, the experiences, the memories, those things, if you don't factor that in, you're doing yourself and the product a disservice, because that has to be factored in. It provides an opportunity to do something I would not be able to do otherwise. I think that's true for a lot of us. I don't think without DVC, Sean would have just spent a week with his friends in Alani.
Yeah, it would have been $7,200 if we had to do cash, and even though I could do it, I wouldn't have done it. I wouldn't have. We would have stayed. I just been like, oh my god, no! We would have just stayed somewhere less expensive. So, and it was well worth it.
And the memories that you make from that trip,
right?
The memories you make from that trip. So none of that, that has to be factored in to any discussion of joining DVC.
And speaking on that same value, I mean, again, as a local, I had family coming up for Christmas, and I was able to, about 2 weeks in advance, I think 2 or 3 weeks in advance, look on the dashboard or find a studio at Animal Kingdom Lodge for 16 points a night Christmas Day. And I was able to say, hey guys, you have a studio Christmas Day staying at Animal Kingdom Lodge. And that's just awesome to do. And I even looked to see what studios were Christmas Day at Animal Kingdom Lodge, and they're like $500. So just 16 points. There you go. Merry Christmas.
Yep. And stories like that are plentiful. So I enjoyed having this discussion. I'm grateful that I got through it without crying, because whenever I tell the story about my dad, yeah, there it goes. Whenever I tell the story about my dad's last trip to Disney World, it gets me. But I'm grateful for it. I'm grateful for it. I'm grateful for the memory. I'm grateful for the opportunity and the experience. And let's make sure we factor that in when we talk about the value of DVC. And that will do it for this week's episode of our show. We hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you again next week with another edition of the DVC Show. Have a great week, folks.